What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Frank Analysis. I'm your host, Franco. We are going to continue the discussion with the Ghislaine Maxwell case. I am joined today by the one and only Attican, aka Addy Ads, who's been on the ground in Manhattan outside the courthouse covering this case, interviewing people. It's a great pleasure to have you on, Attican. How are you?
Thanks, Franco. I appreciate you having me. It's an honor to be part of your show, and yeah, looking forward to our chat today to update everybody on the Ghislaine Maxwell trial.
So you're kind of new in, I guess, among the people who call themselves progressive, like that crowd, people who keep up with lefty independent media. You're more known in like the Jason Burmis crowd, Ryan Dawson crowd. So is it all right if you introduce yourself a little bit more, give yourself a more of a background on what kind of work you do?
Sure, yeah, of course. I started out doing interviews with authors about 2 years ago, so a little over 2 years ago. And that kind of progressed into covering geopolitics, just seeing the demand for it. There's kind of a bull market for geopolitics, especially during 2020, in the wake of the coronavirus panic and, everyone being locked up for several weeks there and being on the internet. I started reaching out to several people doing more and more interviews. And as I got to read more and do more books, do more author interviews, I kind of got to be able to stand on my own 2 feet as far as covering geopolitical events. And I have been covering the Epstein case loosely, kind of on and off since then. It was never my full time gig that whole time. I was doing a lot of election coverage stuff with regards to the 2020 presidential election, particularly in Atlanta and Fulton County. Fulton County being one of those main counties. With Clark County in Michigan, and I'm sorry, in Nevada, and then over in Detroit, and then Maricopa down in Arizona, as well as up in Wisconsin. But my contacts were all in there. Georgia and Atlanta. So I did a couple stories that got a decent bit of traction at the beginning of 2021, beginning of this year, and then towards the end of last year. I was actually the one who broke the Harrison Deal story when he died under pretty mysterious circumstances with regards to they called it a car crash, but multiple people testified to hearing explosions on the Facebook page of the Pooler Parkway Police Department. Harrison Deal was the aide to Kelly Loeffler and dating the daughter of Governor Kemp at the time when he died, and that was the same week that Governor Kemp issued a signature audit for the election there. And then the bigger one, and that actually caused my account to get terminated on
Mm.
YouTube, which technically would have been the 10th account I was at least part of that got terminated. I've had 9 accounts myself on YouTube that have been
Dang.
terminated. The ninth one was actually the night before yesterday. I woke up and people told me it got terminated, but I was working with Neighborhood News at the time, and George Webb, who has done a lot of work to help me out. So I want to give a huge shout out to him. He was doing a story on Pascal Ferrier trafficking ballots across the Peace Bridge over in Buffalo, New York, which I followed up on. I got some water thrown at my face by
Mhm.
some BLM and Antifa protesters up there. And then the other one was the armed ballot trafficking story, which saw basically ballots being moved from the election prep center in Fulton County on English Street there in Atlanta towards the Sheriff Jackson's office. At the time, Sheriff Ted Jackson, formerly of the FBI, and now Pat Labat, as of the 5th of January this year. And Patrick Byrne actually tweeted that out at the beginning of this year, right before his Twitter account got terminated the first week of this year. And that video, which is still on Rumble if people want to check it out, my
Mhm.
Rumble's Addy Eyes. If you just search it, ADDYADDS, it's got like 500,000 hits there, uh, largely due in part to Byrne tweeting it out. But again, his Twitter got terminated that week. My big YouTube account, which is my kind of my first YouTube account covering this stuff, it was big for me. It was like at 5,000. That one got terminated as well. But nonetheless, the Gateway Pundit picked it up. They featured it front page there. So that was fantastic for me because that was kind of my first breakthrough. But the rest of this year since then, I've been kind of lost in the censorship sauce here. Really haven't seen any growth at all on any of my socials. Thanks, I would say, largely in part to due to the censorship. Until I started covering this trial, which I have been covering, planning on doing for a while, and my Twitter has really been blowing up this past few days here, or past week or so, which is great for me. Um, but yeah, I wrote a book earlier this year. In May, it came out, Public Intelligence, which is kind of my framework for looking at truth and the new media sphere, as some people call it, which is really giving the legacy mainstream media a lot of run for their money. And recently, I've been doing some more shorter written pieces. But again, started out doing interviews, and that kind of morphed into doing my own independent broadcasts on this. But yeah, you mentioned Ryan Dawson. He's been covering this Epstein case since about 13 years ago when Epstein first got arrested. He got notified. And I found him through Sean Atwood, who was my first big interview. I went over
Mm,
to England, interviewed him, and then another author, political activist, and writer, Pepsi Watson, who was incarcerated, free Pepsi Watson. And so big shout out to Sean Atwood and Ryan Dawson for really doing immense, fantastic work on this case with regards to Epstein and now Maxwell. And Atwood actually was the one who predicted Epstein's death. I think it was about a week or two before that happened in 2019.
mm,
So that's kind of how it more for me. And I got to a point where I felt like I knew quite a bit about the Epstein case, such that I could kind of teach people a little bit about it. And this trial can kind of has affirmed that for me a bit as well, because I know there's a decent amount of people here who don't really know too much about it, but nonetheless they're covering it here. So that's kind of how it morphed for me, and now it's full time Maxwell and Epstein with
mhm.
this trial. So lots of crazy updates today, which we can get into as well. But yeah, it's again appreciate you having me on, because the censorship, it's made it difficult to get guests on my own show because people look at my numbers and they're like, why would I be on your show? It doesn't seem like you're growing.
Mm.
But now that I kind of have blown up on Twitter a bit here. People are starting to message me back a little more and wanting to get my show. So that's been really helpful for me.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear about that. It's definitely really difficult with the censorship. It's a huge obstacle, but a good way to overcome that is with these collaborations. And I'm glad you're getting all the recognition that you deserve with this trial. Although you deserve more. This is a really it's not getting played. It's not being aired on the mainstream news. It's not getting aired like how the Rittenhouse trial or all these other trials that the media wants to distract us with these divisive topics. I do want to get into first here with some of the stuff that you reported on today. So just so people can
Sure.
get the gist of what you like, how you been covering this case. So you record yourself giving updates and also talking to people who come out of the courthouse. So what can you tell us here? I'm going to work backwards just a little bit here, and then I'll ask about some of the other really significant figures that you talked to here. So you say Pagliuca's cross examination started off week before lunch break. Carolyn's sarcastic answer to "Did she park the car?" got some laughs. Remember, folks, it doesn't matter what we think; it matters what the jury thinks. Yeah, give us some background on that, and also on the jury, right? These aren't politically informed people, right?
Yeah, and it begs the question where they actually found these people who knew little, if anything, about this trial, which was part of the difficulty of the proceedings last week. At the beginning of the trial on Monday, the jury still had not been set and wasn't set until the afternoon, almost the end of the day Monday. But Pagliuca, you mentioned there, it's a silent G. It's an Italian name. He's one of the
Pagliuca. Okay.
defense lawyers for Maxwell. And many people I talked to saw him as one of the weaker defense lawyers, but he did seem to do a decent job cross-examining the witness today, which was a new witness in the trial. Her name was Carolyn. She also was trafficked to Epstein and Maxwell when she was beginning at the age of 13. And this tweet here, Pauliuk was asking about Virginia Roberts.
Mm-hmm.
In my contention, seeming to trying to pin the blame on Roberts as being the one who did the recruiting for Caroline. So maybe inferring, or excuse me, implying that Roberts, instead of Maxwell, was the one who was doing the trafficking, right? With regards to Caroline today. So Polyukas was asking her some pretty basic questions about the first time she went over to Epstein's house, because it was Virginia Roberts who drove her over there for the first time. I think she was 16 years old at the time that happened, and Palika, again, seemed to start off weak, but it went on for about 3 or 4 hours of cross examination. Her initial examination by Comey was not that long, certainly not nearly as long. But Comey may have undone a bit of that towards the end of the day here, asking her several direct questions in quick succession, which saw her kind of break out in tears, which we, saw her lose her emotions a couple times throughout the trial today. One of which was when she first saw a picture of Epstein, and then the her
Mm,
voice kind of started to shake. And the other one was when she was discussing the first time that she went over for one of these quote unquote massages with Epstein, and she saw Virginia Roberts taking off her clothes and then having intercourse with Epstein. When she was relaying that, her voice was also getting visibly shaken there. But very interesting is after the testimony ended, the prosecution today said they may have their case rested by the end of the week. So that likely may mean that the trial won't go 6 weeks, which was pretty shocking news to say the least, because I was kind of planning on being here for the duration, and it has been pretty exhausting. What I do is I'll go in the mornings, as you mentioned. I got some of the defense lawyers entering in the side door on Pearl Street. I call it the media door. I try to ask them questions, but they're pretty mums the word. They're pretty tight lipped. You got Menninger and then Pagliuca, as you mentioned, the defense lawyers, as well as this Bobby Sternheim. We actually saw them today at the morning break. So that was the first time I saw him out in the courtroom itself. It was actually an overflow courtroom because many are not allowed into the courtroom itself because of COVID, lo and behold. And they got these overflow courtrooms where they have these screens and then projectors where they are streaming the trial. So you can watch it and then hear it. Although it can get difficult to hear depending on the who's testifying, who's speaking in to the microphone. So that just makes it all the more difficult to understand what's actually going on. And then I also got the siblings of Ghislaine Maxwell, at least some of them.
mm-hmm,
Kevin
mm-hmm.
Maxwell is at the trial here. I got him leaving for lunch with his sister Isabel, as well as them entering into the courthouse this morning. So I've been asking them about their father's connections to Israeli intelligence and the Mossad as a super spy. He's like a triple agent back in the day before he was killed by the Mossad. Yeah, and this was today when
Yeah.
they were leaving for lunch. Yeah, and I mentioned there Sarah Kellen was mentioned today. She's been mentioned several times throughout the trial. Caroline today said she got a call from Kellen about doing a photo shoot for $500 to $600, which she did nude, which, as far as I could tell, be constituting production of child pornography. So, where's Sarah Kellen? Even before the testimony today, people were wondering what was going on here because she was one of the co-conspirators, and I believe she was listed in the New York Times article under the non-prosecution agreement, which Epstein was formally protected by before his arrest in 2019. So it's my contention that if Epstein can lose the protection of that non-prosecution agreement under not just Alex Acosta, but Attorney General Mukasey at the time, that these other co-conspirators can as well, and not just Kellen, but one of the pilots, Nadia Marchinkova, Leslie Groff, who was kind of an assistant of sorts, Claire Hazel, just to name a few. And then obviously, if you're going up the chain, you're talking about guys like Leslie Wexner, Glenn Dubin, Eva Dubin have actually been mentioned, I think, once last week as well. So that's kind of going up the ladder in terms of the big fish. But it's again confusing. Where's Maria Farmer and Annie Farmer is I think the testimony and the witness that most people are looking forward to the most. Obviously, Maria Farmer got molested by both Epstein and Maxwell
Mm-hmm.
in the Columbus. It was actually in New Albany, Ohio, a state, which New Albany is a town, small city ish. size gathering or community in Ohio that Wexner basically created himself. And she called the police after this happened. She was basically kept against her will there back in the day, and the police straight up told her like, "Yeah, we work for Wexner," and then they hung up on
Mm-hmm.
her. So that's a little bizarre there as well. And again, Annie Farmer, I think, is the testimony that almost everyone is looking forward to the most. And then I also asked this morning about the
Mm-hmm.
ComTouch Siren software
Mm-hmm.
backdoor that I read about in Sean Atwood's book. So I do want to give a shout out to him. He's written probably the best book on this, Who Killed Epstein. And this backdoor would be for Israeli intelligence to spy on Americans, as well as speculation that Bill Gates was blackmailed by them for the purpose of getting their Magellan search engine on MSN at the time in the 90s. In the 1990s, there was kind of this search engine war going on, multiple search engines. So that may have played a part in it. And obviously, Bill Gates has been implicated in the Epstein network before. So I kind of wanted to get my lick in there a little bit. So I was fortunate enough to get them coming in because I actually missed them yesterday. I think she snuck in right at the last minute after the photographers kind of went away. So again, what I've been doing is in the morning getting the defense and any lawyers going in, friends and family like the Maxwell siblings walking in. And interestingly enough, the prosecution I've only seen enter in through the media door once so far this whole trial, and that was yesterday. And I could pick out Comey in that group, as well as Laura Pomerantz and then Allison Moe, part of the government prosecution there. So then after that, it gets to be about 9 o'clock, 9:15, and they start around 9:30 a.m. The proceedings on the daily. So by then, the line to get in the courtroom will have shrunk a bit. So it allows me to stay a bit productive, and people really like these videos of getting them walking in. So I've been trying to get that every single
Yeah.
day. Because otherwise you're just kind of standing in line for a while, and that was definitely the worst. The first day there was by far the most people in terms of reporters, citizens, and mainstream media on the first day, and we had to wait. Shoot, it was a good hour or so in line, and it was pretty cold that first day. Fortunately, it's been a little warmer
Mm-hmm.
this week, kind of in the 40s or so. So hasn't been quite as bad as far as standing around in the cold. And then, like you mentioned, I'll go out today. I just went out to lunch, and then I did some updates. But then they take your phones, so you have to check your phone in, turn it off, and then they give you these chips. Then when you leave, you hand in the chip, and then they give you your phone back. So I'll step outside the courtroom, do a quick Twitter update, usually just video, although we'll do text as well, and then a write up in the evenings on my Substack, and then more tweets on Twitter, as well as a stream that I do in the evenings. That's kind of been my routine that I kind of found out works for me. Some days I won't get to a stream or I won't get to a write up, and I'll just include it in the week's end. So kind of playing it by ear. This is the first trial I've covered in person, so I'm learning as I go here. And I met a lawyer who
Mm-hmm.
is the only independent litigator who's covering this
Mm-hmm.
trial on the ground. And that's something too. There's been a lot of there it is, Joe Neerman. He's actually going to be on my show on Saturday, I believe at
Awesome.
7 p.m. Eastern time. If people want to check that out, he was just talking when I spoke to him yesterday about the Rittenhouse trial, the differences between that, the legacy media, and the political division in our country, and how guys like him and myself and yourself, Franco, are really filling the hole as far as truth and information goes, and how the legacy mainstream media is really failing on that. But that was another thing too. Yesterday, the government seemed to make quite a big mistake, losing a motion. That's the prosecution. The government is, um, as far as admitting evidence of these schooler outfits that the last witness testified to. The first witness's pseudonym was Jane, and today was Kate, and then yesterday I want to say was. I'm sorry. Today was Carolyn. Yesterday was Kate. So Kate was talking about these
Mm-hmm.
schoolgirl outfits they had pictures of, and then I think they actually had the outfits themselves in 2019. And the government didn't want to admit it as evidence for fear of further traumatizing the victims. And Judge Nathan was saying that she sympathizes with that, but that kind of leaves the court hanging because they
Mm-hmm.
don't have that evidence, and uh, certainly it seemed by most of the people I've talked to that would have helped the prosecution. So a little bit confusing on the prosecution side. The strategy for the defense seems a little bit more clear cut. They want to basically discredit the memories of the witnesses due to the amount of time that has happened between the sexual abuse and the trafficking and now. And one counter to that from a psychologist that testified last week was this concept of this delayed disclosure, whereby sexual abuse victims tend to not disclose what has happened to them until much time has passed. And typically, the correlation is that the earlier in the lifetime that this abuse happened, the longer the time passes between the abuse itself and the disclosure. So that was kind of a pushback on that argument. So really going after the memories, and their counter is going to be this psychologist Elizabeth Loftus, who specializes in debunking "quote unquote" sexual abuse memories. She testified in defense of Harvey Weinstein, Ted Bundy, the Robert Durst murder trial, the McMartin sex abuse preschool trial in California, and I believe all those ended in failures as far as Loftus's side of the trial went. So again, debunking the memories, and then kind of the gold digger aspect, the fact that or the assertion that they were just going after the money, and that's why they are coming after
Mm.
Maxwell at this time. And that's a question they've been asking all the witnesses: is do you have a financial stake in the trial? And all of them have said no. Even asking the chauffeur Juan Alessi that, and it did seem like the defense was even trying to pin it on him. Christian Everdale, who is one of the uh, lawyers for Maxwell, even came out and asked him directly, "That doesn't make you guilty of sex trafficking, does it, Mister Alessi?" Because they were trying to make it seem like uh, because he was the driver and the chauffeur, he was the one that was doing the recruiting instead of Maxwell. When in reality, he was, although he may have been aware, which I think he was, of what was going on. He was doing what he was told in terms of driving to and from wherever it may have been. He was also kind of the house manager. But that's something too is as far as dispelling myths around the trial. People are calling him the butler, but he wasn't the butler.
Mm.
The butler was Alfredo Rodriguez. He was the guy who tried to sell the black book to the lawyers back in the day. The FBI went after him, and he's actually now dead, which I also find a bit suspicious. I think the lead detective in Florida, Joseph Riccieri, who back in the initial investigation, which is the Palm Beach Police Department, he's also dead. So that's also pretty interesting there. Uh, and then I think the tertiary thing they're going after is the kind of a character assassination. So
Mm.
discrediting the witnesses by painting them as bad people, which I think it was a little bit easier for the defense to do with the second and third witnesses. With the first one, it was not that easy to do. I don't think because of the fact that she's a bit more stable. She has a career in Hollywood, still is a working actress, and this witness today, Caroline, a much more difficult, I think, upbringing. She was molested by her grandfather beginning when she was 4. You know, lower class and not very much money. Her mother was an alcoholic and a drug addict as well. And FC and Maxwell tried to get her to travel with them, but she basically told them no because she was too young at the time. I think she was 15, I want to say, when they kind of broached the subject of them traveling. I believe it was actually to the island there, Little St. James, which Epstein called Little St. Jeff's.
Mm.
And Yeah, so the tactics or strategy of the defense seems a little bit more clear cut. Although at least at the beginning of the trial, it did seem like they have a bigger uphill battle. But after this week with the prosecution, um, it's I may have mentioned it after the proceedings ended up today. They said they're going to maybe rest their case after this week, which is even more bizarre.
Mhm.
And I mentioned before, it's some of the more explosive witnesses like Maria Farmer and Virginia Roberts aren't testifying, so that's confusing as well. So again, my first trial, I don't have much to compare it to, but
Mhm.
does seem to be out of the ordinary. A lot of things that are going on. Uh, although you know, further dispelling myths here, there's been a bit of misinformation from some pretty big accounts on Twitter. Adam
Hmm.
Baldwin and Tim Kennedy were saying that on the Sunday before the trial, which was not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before the first Monday, that no media or reporters were allowed in the courtroom, and that was just utterly false. So I don't really
Hmm.
know where that came from. The first bit of information I could find that published was on Adam Baldwin's profile, so I'm not really sure where he got that. And then Jack Posobiec on
Yeah.
Tuesday of last week on his podcast was saying that jurors weren't showing up because they were getting death threats, and that also was completely false. So a
Mm.
lot of misinformation around the trial. Again, I can't tell what these guys' intentions are, so I can't really explicitly say if it was disinfo. But that has only clouded the information surrounding this trial even further.
Yeah, yeah. Lack of evidence there with those comments from Jack Posobiec and some of those other people you mentioned. You are one to testify too. You're a reporter who's there. It doesn't seem like you had your life threatened. Otherwise, you would have said it. And same with other reporters who are down there. But yeah, based on everything that you are telling us that you've been reporting, it seems like they're trying really hard to downplay this case, and they're trying to just charge her for. They're not trying to charge her for more crimes, which would be revealed if they brought more people to testify. They just want to charge her for what she's on trial for. You mentioned that it's probably going to be cut short, as was also mentioned by at Tracker Trial, which I've been following here. It said the Ghislaine Maxwell case may close at the end of this week instead of going through 5 to 6 weeks. Unbelievable. I agree with that. They could have gone for months with evidence, field staged and suppressed. A lot of big names could come up if it were to continue. And also, we have her siblings here. We have her brother, who is trying to make us feel bad for Ghislaine Maxwell. Same thing with Bloomberg News putting out an article talking about how Ghislaine Maxwell could be a victim in all this. So I just want to get your thoughts on here on her brother talking about how she's been mistreated in prison, how she's barely been eating, and some of those other comments by Bloomberg News. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, I got this was yesterday. They had another conference last week, which I missed, but I wasn't too sad about missing that. And yeah, like you said, he's basically complaining about the conditions of his sister Ghislaine. She gets basically just a boiled egg, which is sometimes or often moldy. He said a piece of bread or two, and then a piece of fruit or two, and that's kind of her nutritional sustenance for the day. Uh, as well as the fact that she's shackled up, and has to wait sometimes 90 minutes when she's brought back into custody at the end of the day. But if you know anything about the American prison system, that's kind of par for the course. That's actually how I, you know, came to first learning about corruption or state
Mm-hmm.
corruption was through the prison system, and the American prison system is one of the most broken in the world. We have the biggest prison population. There's an incentivization for private prisons to incarcerate any and all Americans, basically for you could possibly characterize it as slave labor. It's pennies on the dollar labor for private corporations, which is not right at all. So as far as this goes, that's pretty much all inmates. They're getting not very good treatment. Prison guards are often sadistic. In Arizona, Sean Atwood testifies to prison guards killing inmates, basically torturing inmates at times as well. So he was asked actually today after lunch or during lunch when they left for lunch if they got any response, and they didn't, and that's uh, unsurprising to me. And I think anybody who knows anything about the American prison system. But you mentioned Maxwell Trial Tracker, and I was a bit suspicious of this account to start, but I
Mm.
actually did get intel about an hour ago. This is a quote. It says Tracker Trial just switched usernames for this trial. They came
Mm.
from the Rittenhouse trial and were a meme account before. Already had all those followers when they joined our circus. They're not in the business of justice.
Oh, they
So
didn't even know that.
yeah, I didn't. I mean, again, I was suspicious, but I didn't want to. I wanted to be supportive of anybody covering this, but what was bizarre for me is their Substack had like 20,000 followers before the trial even started, and I was like, where
That's
did
a
these guys
lot.
come
Yeah.
from? And their Twitter account has like a 500,000 followers, and they're not even here. So I think you really have to give precedence to the reporters and journalists, mostly independent, who are doing the best work,
Hmm.
I would say, on this, who are actually at the trial in Manhattan. This guy is
Yeah.
probably at home in his mother's basement tweeting and getting all these thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers. Not
Yeah.
even at the trial. We didn't even know who this person is. They could be controlled opposition for all we know, but they haven't even followed Maria Farmer. She was kind of saying earlier tonight. So I would, encourage people to follow accounts like myself. There's this the lawyer I mentioned as well. You should follow him. He's Good Logic on YouTube. LAWGIC. I'm not really allowed on YouTube, as I mentioned. I just got my
Hmm.
ninth account terminated. 10th if you count the neighborhood news accounts I've been a part of, or even more. Yeah, that's just something else I want to mention too. I think you really should give precedence to the people who are actually here and doing the work, and not people who are being armchair generals. Because this Maxwell trial tracker, he's not following me as
And
far as I know.
mysterious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they're just basically regurgitating the information that the people who are actually here are putting out. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Yeah, thanks for putting that out there. Yeah, I had no idea about that, how they changed account names. I just ran into it like last week. Um, but definitely, more weight should be put on journalists and reporters like yourself who are on the ground. I want to play this clip that you had the other day.
Oh,
Let me
sure,
exit out
sure.
of. Let me get out of these other tabs. So you ran into Vicky Ward. You asked about her knowing Ghislaine Maxwell and if it's a conflict of interest, and if she's calling Maria Farmer a liar. And Ward says she will sue me and anyone who makes that claim. If true, it is a betrayal, such lack of integrity. So I'll play this real quick. But before I do, who is just give us a little bit of a background on Vicky Ward.
Sure. Yeah. This was, I think, in the latter half of last week. Vicky Ward was actually the first journalist that I can tell that did a profile on Epstein, which your viewers may have read it. The article is called "The Talented Mr. Epstein," which was written in 2003, and she, in addition to that, kind of has been writing articles and tweets that have been quite supportive of Ghislaine Maxwell. And if you notice, which we'll watch here, she never actually denies uh, being, being close friends with her. So uh, it's something I was planning on doing because I saw her in the courtroom. But again, your phones aren't allowed in there, so I didn't really have an opportunity to record an interview with her. But fortunately, I went out. I think it was lunchtime, if I'm not mistaken, and she was standing right there. So it was like perfect. And I was like, I gotta do this right
Mm.
now. So I did. It was perfect opportunity. So I pounced, and I think I did what I set out to do.
Awesome, awesome. All right, so yeah, I'm gonna play this real quick, but yeah, definitely in those situations, the adrenaline starts kicking, and you want to make sure that you say everything correctly and you have a good response to whatever they try to gaslight you with. Yeah, let me start this real quick for everybody.
Addie Eds, why did you tip off Ghislaine that Maria Farmer went to the FBI?
I said that is an absolute lie.
Don't you think it's a conflict of interest for you to be friends with Ghislaine Maxwell and reporting on this case?
You can listen to my podcast and watch my documentary series, Chasing Gillette, where I explain in great detail exactly the extent of how much and how little I knew Gillette. She was someone I would bump into around New York because we're both British. I went to Cambridge, she went to Oxford. And no, given that I was the first reporter to dig into Jeffrey Epstein, I see no conflict whatsoever. I know more about this story and this trial than any other journalist.
Do you deny being friends with Ghislaine Maxwell?
I don't deny knowing her. I'm not a close friend of her, as has been reported.
And does that mean you think
didn't
Maria
answer the
Farmer's lying?
question.
Maria Farmer has never told me that she thinks that I tipped off Galen about the FBI. I don't even know what that means. I don't even know what that means. Maria Farmer has said publicly she went to the FBI. Why would I have spoken to Galen Maxwell about it?
I think that was after the fact. Wouldn't that be a pretty big betrayal considering the big story she gave you?
The answer is I never mentioned to Galen Maxwell that Maria Farmer had gone to the FBI. That is false and defamatory. And if anyone repeats that, I will sue them. Okay?
Thank you, Miss Ward.
Well, she got really close to your camera there. Like you got really, really angry because usually it's behavior that you see in people that are getting exposed. But you want to tell us more about that, like exchange. What are your thoughts after that? And you want to tell us a little bit more, analyze her
Yeah.
response.
Yeah. So right after that, I stopped recording, but she turned up and looked at me and she said, "I'll sue you too." But yeah, I mean, she talked to pretty much every member of Maria Farmer's family in her kind of investigation and reporting, and as mentioned, knows Ghislaine. And you just got to read her content. You can tell she is at least a bit fond of her just by reading what she posts publicly,
Mm-hmm.
and that in addition to the fact that I do trust Maria Farmer's testimony and what happened, and she, similar to Virginia Giuffre, who had to flee from Thailand with her then boyfriend, now husband, to Australia. Maria Farmer kind of had to go into hiding in the United States here after that, and both got, particularly Maria, not really much help from the FBI, and in fact got intimidated by them. Actually, similar to the Franklin scandal, which is another sex trafficking network that trafficked children. And I went to, on Saturday, the Epstein Justice Rally organized by Nick Bryant, who broke that. And he has a tie into this case, too, because he was the guy with the black book. Recall I said Alfredo Rodriguez, the butler, the actual butler, was trying to sell that by hook or by crook. Again, Bryant doesn't reveal his sources, as most journalists shouldn't. He got a hold of that black book, and he was the first guy with it back in 2012, and he sat on it for about 3 years before releasing it to Gawker in 2015. And of course, this was before Gawker was taken down by Peter Thiel in a pretty elaborate conspiracy, which is another show on its own. Probably, I think Ryan Holiday wrote a book on that. Which again, that's a whole nother story there. So Ward has been covering this for a while, almost 20 years now. When looking back on it, and that's the interesting thing about this whole saga. Is it's been going on for so long. The first time that they searched and did a seizure of Epstein's property in Palm Beach was in October of 2005. And I'm a pretty young guy as far as reporters go. I'm usually one of the youngest in the room, if not the youngest. And I was like 10 years old when that happened. And here I am, a decade or so later reporting on it. So really interesting to look at just the scope of this. It's different from the Franklin network in terms of the length of time this network was in power. It's over 25 years they were trafficking Maxwell and Epstein. Whereas the Franklin network was only in power about 12 years or so. Although it did need two more grand juries to cover up, a total of 3 grand juries. And that's the thing too about grand juries, is they're very easily manipulated. They're just regular citizens, and the special prosecutor has this thing called prosecutorial discretion, whereby it's pretty ludicrous, actually. They can choose what evidence the jury is allowed to see, which is just absurd. Anybody who learns that, I think, is usually shocked to find that out. But unfortunately, there's no special grand jury here in this trial. But again, a lot of bizarre stuff going on here, especially with regards to this trial seemingly not going to go the distance. I was planning on being here until mid-January, which is a pretty long trial, comparing it to the Rittenhouse trial. But again, the Rittenhouse trial was a state trial, right? So that's why it was allowed to be televised, and federal trials are not.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, uh, this trial has a lot more evidence, a lot more time has passed since that. You know, the Rittenhouse trial, that event, very recent in terms of legal history. You know, it just happened last year, and they already wrapped it up. You know, 2 weeks. And I didn't cover that myself, but some other people here did. I was just on Rundown Lives. I had him on. And I think I'm going to be on his show. So he was actually a witness in that trial. Uh, really, really interesting looking at not just the players in the trial itself, but some of the journalists who have been covering this as well. Even like the Miami Herald, they've been kind of on this as far as the mainstream goes. And I do want to look into that a bit more because I've heard some similar whispers from people here at the trial that I don't want to name her yet because I don't have. Um, I'm not well versed such that I can speak on it yet, but that a person with the Miami Herald may or may not be in a similar vein as Vicky Ward in terms of possibly being some sort of controlled opposition or informational propaganda tool, let's say, for the defense in this case. And the defense does seem to be doing a much better job of controlling the media narrative. As far as appearances and such, I'm not really sure why the prosecution isn't making quite as many media appearances. And again, one of the prosecutors who actually did the examination today of Caroline is Maureen Comey, who is the daughter of
Mm-hmm.
James Comey, who
Mm-hmm.
is former FBI director, right? And she was actually on the 2016 Epstein prosecution before he didn't kill himself. And she was the one, along with one other lawyer who's a male lawyer whose name escapes me at the time, explaining how the footage of Epstein's incarceration seemed to disappear or get lost. So you got all these litigators in New York, and somehow Maureen Comey, daughter of James Comey, gets arguably the two biggest criminal conspiracy cases ever. I think you could argue. So it's like how is that work out? But you know, Ghislaine's defense also has Bobby Sternheim, who is known for defending a lot of mafia bosses, a lot of crime bosses, a lot of RICO cases. Christian Everdell, who's one of the younger prosecutors. I've heard a lot of people speak somewhat highly of him. They see him as pretty sharp. And then Polyuka, who people have been speaking a little less highly of, but he did seem to do a decent job today cross-examining Carolyn. He's pretty brutal, I got to say. You know, many people kind of spoke of it as a sleazy cross-examination today. Caroline broke out in tears several times when the picture of Epstein was shown, as I mentioned, and then at the end, actually, Maureen Comey. I don't know. I don't think this is purposeful, but she gave her a series of quick, direct questions in quick succession. You know, why are you here? And then Caroline basically came out and said, Ghislaine Maxwell ruined my life. And she was, you know, visibly distraught then and crying as well. So maybe undoing a bit of the work that Polyuka did throughout the afternoon because the cross examination was a lot longer than Comey's initial examination of Caroline. But again, I'm really looking forward to Annie Farmer's testimony and to
Mm-hmm.
see what's going on there because I believe she's a psychologist herself, and hers is probably going to be a lot more vacuum sealed. There's going to be less holes in it, and probably going to aid the prosecution a lot more than the defense. But as far as which way it's going to go, one way or another, I still can't say say at this point. You know, it's you know, I made this point today in one of my videos on Twitter at one Addy Ads. Is that it doesn't matter what we think; it matters what the jury's thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and what are they
Yeah.
thinking about this? Which is, I think, partially why they spent so much time and had a lot of difficulty trying to get the jury set. Is because they wanted to make sure they had the most neutral and unbiased jurors they could find, which I'm sure was quite a task because of the media uh, coverage, but more so the public demand and interest in this trial has made
Yeah.
it such that almost nobody hasn't heard about you know, these people.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it went on even longer, like they've already name dropped a few people. Like we had Epstein's pilot name drop a few people who were on the plane. Uh, and I think believe it was Jane Doe that name dropped Trump and Prince Andrews. I want to play this clip real quick of a speech that was given by someone else who was on the ground, another journalist,
Sure.
Chris Hedges, and I want to get your thoughts on it because he says it's just the beginning. But yeah, like after playing this clip, like all these, I have other follow up questions to ask you about some of these names, but I'll go ahead and play this for the audience.
Okay.
Obstacles that society has placed before them in their pursuit of justice. The trial of Ghislaine Maxwell will not hold to account the powerful and wealthy men who are complicit in these assaults. Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, hedge fund billionaire Glenn Dubin, former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, former Secretary of the Treasury, and former President of Harvard, Larry Summers, Steven Pinker, Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz, Les Wexner, the billionaire CEO of Victoria's Secret and Limited Stores, J.P. Morgan banker Jess Staley, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, real estate mogul Mort Zuckerman, former Maine Senator George Mitchell, Harvey Weinstein, and many others.
Yeah, as you said, many others. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I want to get your thoughts on that, as well as some comments that Maria Farmer has made about Les Wexner, calling him the head of the snake in all of this. What evidence have you found that further confirms this, or would you say that it's not exactly true? What has your research told you?
Yeah, I mean, Maria Farmer is a great source of information on this trial, and other people have talked about the idea that Wexner and Epstein actually had a sexual relationship. It's pretty well known that Wexner is gay, or at least bisexual. I think he's actually married, but less so with Epstein. And the question there is Epstein a closet gay or closet bisexual, or did he just kind of sell? Obviously, he sold his soul, but did he sell a sexuality as well just to gain this power? Because Wexner had an attraction to him. And it did seem that Wexner was the head of the snake insofar as he was the source of funding for Epstein, because that's a question too that really hasn't been brought up in the mainstream media or this trial. Is where did Epstein get all this money?
Right.
And Wexner, as we know from the Limited brand and Victoria's Secret, etc., is extremely wealthy and powerful. He's part of the mega group of Israeli billionaires who are very partial towards Israeli interests, despite the fact they're American, and that, as well as the fact that Farmer testified to getting molested at Wexner's residence, being protected by the police there. Wexner over in New Albany, Ohio. But yeah, you mentioned Chris Hedges. We saw that video
Mm-hmm.
there. And I did a quick interview with him at the Epstein Justice Rally, which was where that video was taken. And he did say, this is not this is the end. This is the beginning, which is my hope. But again, what's the play there? They're going to go up or down as far as the ladder goes, or the chain. Going up would be going towards those Wexners, the Glenn Dubins, the Leon Blacks of the world, and then going down would be kind of the co-conspirators that have been listed. The Leslie Groff, Nadia Marcinkova, Claire Hazel, the other ladies who helped out traffic and aid in procuring these children. So that's I think that's all of our hope, is that this continues. But it's arguable that this trial is only happening at all because of public demand for it. Going back to like Eric Weinstein last year, when I want to say it was in the spring. It was still. I don't think it was filmed in the spring, but the clip kind of blew up over the course of the lockdown. He's basically saying, like, where's Maxwell? Why can't we call up Interpol? She's extremely wealthy. It shouldn't be that hard to track her down. So big shout out to Eric Weinstein for doing that. But not just him, being the kind of modern intellectual giant that he is, but the thousands and millions of people, independent journalists, writers, reporters, investigators, etc., geopolitical and public intel analysts who have really kind of demanded implicitly or explicitly for justice in this case. Because there was a discussion I've been having too: is this a show trial? And someone brought up, well, if it is a show trial, why did they arrest her at all? But again, going back to that demand in the court of public opinion, I think playing a bigger role in this than maybe a lot of people realize.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Another question that I think people should be asking is, with these all these billionaires that are connected with this case, like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, what do they have to gain from Epstein, who they are significantly richer than? Like, why were they coming to him for collaboration? It seems like there's something bigger that's going on that the public deserves answers to, because these are the people who we want calling the shots, funding politicians, these people who are involved in illegal action like this, harming other individuals, as we've seen with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's involvement. So, yeah, do you have any final comments you want to leave people with, anything I just mentioned there, and what you are going to do going forward?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, those guys mentioned there. I think Bezos is probably the most suspicious out of the guys you
Mm.
mentioned. Musk obviously has been pictured with Maxwell. I think I posted a photo. And, other people have seen that as well. And there were, believe it or not, some powerful individuals who went to Epstein's Island, Little St. James, and did not partake in anything. The one example I can think of is Al Gore, and Virginia Roberts testified to Gore showing up at the island and really giving all of his attention to his wife and kind of doting on her, which is an anomaly as far as visits to the island went. And likewise, sometimes people would just show up and leave right away. But another thing too about Wexner is he gave Epstein power of attorney, which only confuses this situation more. If Wexner's the boss, why is he giving the keys of the kingdom to Epstein? That's even more confusing. But yeah, as far as this trial goes and how things are going to develop, I'm just going to keep covering it. People have speculated, like Ryan Dawson. I want to give him a shout out again too, because he's done such great work on this case. That the trial would not even go 4 weeks, and we're only not even midway into week 2, and it's looking like it might wrap up much sooner than we expected. Certainly, much sooner than 6 weeks. If the prosecution's resting their case by the end of the week, where are we going to go from here? So. Only time will tell as far as the updates on the trial go, and that's something too. Is I try to stay in the courthouse for the whole time. I think it was Friday. It wasn't until the very last few minutes of the day that it was revealed that Juan Alessi actually tried to steal a gun from Epstein, and he was the one that stole the money, which was the result of the first police visit to Epstein's house 2 years before that search and seizure in 2005. So again, the defense is trying to do anything they can to pin the blame on anyone but Maxwell by discrediting or attacking the character of these witnesses, even if they did used to work with Epstein, like Alessi, or if they're just witnesses in the sense of being victims. But yeah, I mean, I think time will tell with this trial. I'm just curious to see what the public reaction will be at the end. Regardless of what that result is, I'm really curious to see how the public at large is gonna react to it. Are people going to be satisfied one way or another? It's my contention that even if Maxwell's head does get offered up on a platter, that there's still going to be a lot of people, I think, as they should, that are demanding even more justice, as you mentioned, going either up the chain or down it, or ideally both, because it's something about the FBI is they're very selective with who they prosecute and who they don't, and I think anybody who doesn't realize that about the FBI needs to wake up a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And there's a lot more to be discussed here on this case. I could talk to you for hours about this. Talking to you about more of the background of James Comey's daughter, how we keep seeing the same names involved with the Great Reset and all these other issues with things like this, with the Epstein case. So I want to also give a shout out to your work here. Here's Addy Ads Twitter is at one Addy Ads. You guys should follow him and keep up with his work. Oh, you've been growing a lot there. I shout out to you, man. Congrats for that.
Thank
Where
you.
else can people
Thank you.
support your work?
Thank you, man. Yeah, my website is addyads.one, and I usually post all my links on there. Again, I do have a YouTube channel, Lord Commander Attican, but I try not to send people that way too much, just because it seems to be only a matter of time before I'm on there. But I am on Rockfin. We're on Rockfin right now on Franco's show. So if people want to give me a sub on Rockfin, that would be great. Jamie Deluxe just got me referred on Rockfin, so that's been great getting on Rockfin. Brand new tube, BitChute, UGE Tube. I'm on a few other websites as well. I'm on Rumble, as I mentioned. That Gateway Pundit story I did. But that's part of this too. Is the YouTube is still the gorilla in the room. They're the silverback, and they got that 80-20 of the viewership online. Especially last year with YouTube blowing up, big. I think bigger than it has ever done so. But another thing too is like if people want to really help me out, doing a PayPal or Venmo or Cash App would be much appreciated. It's really expensive out here in New York. I don't
Mm-hmm.
understand how people live out here, Franco. It's ridiculously expensive. It's
Yeah.
to use the subway. If say you have to use the subway every day, and you want to buy a month pass, it's like $120 a month to use the subway. It's absurd. I don't understand it, and that's the thing too is there's like very little space out here. So, I mean,
Yeah.
New Yorkers they're a different breed. They like not very much space, and they don't seem to like talking to each other either. So it's maybe the longer I'm here, maybe my opinion of New York will improve. But I have been here once before when I was in West Point visiting someone a long time ago. When I was a child, we came here and visited. Did kind of the tourist thing, went to the Statue of Liberty and stuff. So in that sense, it's kind of my first visit here as an adult and moving around. But just kind of learning the subway and such. But yeah, AddyAds.one is my website, and then one AddyAds is Twitter, and that's the spot to get the quickest updates, the most real time updates. Just because it does take a bit to go through security. It's a chore, going in and out of the building. But that's one of my biggest audiences now, and yeah, I appreciate it, man. Because like I said, this censorship, I got to say, especially during the summer, it was very demoralizing. Losing channel after
Mm-hmm.
channel after channel, and it just, I think that's part of whoever these people are. We kind of know who they are. The people who run YouTube and the technocracy, they want people like us to quit and that's it's really an informational and psychological war. So finally, seeing my numbers grow after almost a year now. It was almost a 11 months ago today when my account started blowing up thanks to those stories I did breaking through. It's almost relieving more than anything,
Mm-hmm.
seeing my numbers go up. But again, it's happened before. People have lost their Twitters, so it's just kind of a fight that we have to roll with the punches and keep at it. But yeah, if anybody wants to help out with expenses here, I would much appreciate it. And yeah, again, Twitter. Also, one thing I want to say about Twitter is I'm doesn't seem I'm allowed to broadcast on Twitter anymore as of 2 days ago. So that is maybe a coincidence. In my experience, it's not a coincidence whatsoever. But in that sense, Rockfin seems to be one of the better places to go to, and these other video websites. But I like Rockfin because they pay creators. These other websites I mentioned, there's not really a way to monetize, and that's the thing too is we want to get paid for our work, Franco and myself.
Yeah.
So that's what's nice about Rockfin. So I'm probably going to spend more time on Rockfin. I do have an Odyssey too, but I only have
Yeah.
so much time in the day. So I was going to try to update it today, but it looks like I've run out of time again. So I do have an Odyssey as well, and all my links again at adyads.one. So appreciate it
Yeah.
again, sir. Thanks for having me on. It's
Of
really
course,
fun.
man. I appreciate you coming on, and of course, if they're highly censoring you, it's because you're doing something right. And it's like you said, they're trying to make you feel disheartened. It's like a psychological warfare. They want you to make you feel like, oh man, is it really worth it? Like channel after channel, they keep taking me down, but you kept fighting, you kept pushing through, and it paid off, man. I'm really proud of what you're doing, and I'll definitely look forward to having you back and looking at more of your work. So yeah, everybody
Appreciate it,
else,
brother. Thank you so
of
much. And I'd
course,
love to
man.
have you on my show too. Maybe after the trial, I'll have more time to do my own shows again. So I'd love to have you on sometime.
Yeah, I would love to come on, man. I would love to come on. And everybody else, stay informed. You're not alone. Take care.
Stay frosty, folks.